Okay, this is the next slide. So, good afternoon, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you, Stephen, for inviting me, and I've been already overwhelmed and inspired from all the speakers that have gone before me. So I hope to have a small impact on myself and what I share with you and what I have learned in my career over the last 20 years or so. I'm here as well in conjunction with Revive Active, the sponsors of the event. I've been working with them for 4 or 5 years in lots of different ways. I met them first of all through my work with the Galway senior football team, and they're fantastic to work with. They really care. They're always on the cutting edge. That's why they're here. They want to be in the places to really help people. But yeah, this is where my career has taken me. I work with the Irish Defence Forces as well, Galway senior camogie team. I know. And Sammy talking there about the Dublin football team and that extra time semi-final you were talking about last year. Was it this, the Galway team?
You beat us last year in the quarter and we beat you this year.
This is it, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, everyone has a different slant on all these stories. And yeah, I was 4 years then with the Galway senior football team, which I really, really enjoyed. Yeah, but I'm out and about, I'm on the ground, I'm in corporate settings, I'm in the sidelines and ditches, and that's where I want to be because I'm learning, I'm seeing, and I love the fact that my work has taken me to the female athletes and to the men's game because I want to know both, I want to see both, and I care about both. But the nutrition, thankfully it was integrated in the different speakers at different times as well, but I really want to get across to the coaches in the room, to the parents in the room, that we need to understand how much these young athletes need to eat. And it's not just enough to be eating healthy, they need to be eating enough of the right foods at the right time. And it's a big task on any family because I have 3 teenagers myself, they're very involved in sport, and I'm flat out trying to keep them fueled as well, even with my knowledge and stuff. And it's tricky and it's challenging. And I think it came up in one of, I think Niamh mentioned it as well, especially for the young athletes that are showing a lot of promise. They're on a lot of teams. And when I'm going around in schools and hearing from these young athletes, and I ask them, are you getting a rest day? And they're not getting any rest days. They're playing 7 days a week, especially the better girls and boys. And the coaches aren't talking to each other. So I'd love to share today a little bit of what your coaches can do and what parents can do just to support along the way, because they do get it at when they reach adulthood. They're only more than likely playing one sport, specifying one sport. They'll get the nutritionists, the coaches, the doctors, not always on the female teams, but they generally have an understanding at that point, but it's at underage, and the link between injury and I'll just share a little bit on that as well. So I don't know if you can fully see this, but when I'm talking to any group or individual, I just generally ask them where they think they are on the scale of 0 to 10 in terms of energy. Now, pre-competition, pre-game, pre-big event, you'd like your athlete to be like 8 out of 10 as such, fueled, nourished, educated, knowing what suits them, when to time their meals, feeling good, feeling ready. But again, that's not always the case. And when I go into a new group or a new team, you can have some with an education knowledge of 8 out of 10, and others might be 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10. So if they are, I have to find out and know who I'm talking to, because there's nothing worse than just delivering a message, thinking everybody is up there feeling well. There's most often in a group, there's so many, even at a high level, that are 3 out of 10. They're overwhelmed, they're feeling burnt out, they're getting injured, the mental load of being injured consistently is affecting them. So there's a very different message depending on where players are at and where the team is at. And my goal, working like all in alongside a high performance team, would have everybody in the group, all players, knowing what it feels like to be 8 out of 10. And that takes an awful lot of time. They might know a little bit about hydration, they might know a little bit about fueling for a game, but are they fueling enough for training? Are they resting? Are they recovering? How is their sleep? How are they managing themselves? Where they're at? Are they a student? Are they a parent? And I've loved even working closely with the Galway senior camogie team, that I'm now dealing with mothers playing sport, which is fantastic, and that's new to me, and new research on that. But they'll have different needs. So I think knowing where your players are at it is really important, where your athletes are at. And like, have you heard, hands up who has heard of relative energy deficiency in sport? Okay, so that's a handful in the room. Red S is something that I would like you to know about and to look out for. And I think it was a great point as well. I think Sammy said it as well, that okay, you don't want to talk about nutrition because you're not a nutritionist, but there's nothing wrong with making sure that, you know, if you know about something, sharing it on your groups or your WhatsApp groups. And Sport Ireland, RFU, GA, they're all trying to get this message. Well, it's not out there the whole time, but just to understand that if you're not fueling enough for the intensity of your training, you could run the risk of experiencing or suffering from red S, which is meaning you're not getting enough energy for the intensity of training. And it's not just an elite setting, and it's not just male athletes, and it's not just female athletes, it's also recreational athletes. So you might be seeing a lot of those as well. So some people who mightn't be on teams or mightn't be considered an athlete as such are training at really high levels, endurance sports, again, not understanding about rest days. And they're also likely to suffer from red S. And what we know about red S is that you have a high propensity of getting stress fractures, of injury, okay, if you're not fueling enough for training. Immunity concerns and immune dysfunction, so a lot of colds and flus and infections, constantly sick. And these are things to look out in your athlete. Obviously a drop in performance, not playing well, used to be playing well, all of a sudden there's something that's changed and they don't know why. Rapid weight loss, sleep concerns, mental, lower mood, erratic moods. And again, when we're talking about the youth athlete, we can often think that's because they're teenagers and they're moody and teenagers are moody. But it can be because they're not fueling enough and they're not able for the intensity of their training. I did my master's research there a few years ago on the female athlete training and competing during menstruation. And what they shared, these 150 senior inter-county athletes with me, was, you know, astounding. And I wasn't expecting to be in lockdown. I didn't sign up for my master's thinking there was going to be a global pandemic and homeschooling my kids. And it was really, really tough. But once the responses started coming in from these athletes, I was like, mind blown. And what the senior girls and female athletes wanted to share to make sure that the younger athletes coming weren't exposed to the same kind of lack of communication, lack of support around the menstrual cycle. But losing your period is a big part of underfueling as well. And sometimes it suits female athletes to lose their period. They don't have to worry about it, but it can have a massive knock-on effect on their hormonal health, their propensity for stress fractures, and just to have the understanding that increase in calorific intake can restore the menstrual cycle as well. Even just by 500 calories a day can help restore it. So again, is there someone in your gym, in your team, in the sporting environment that can bring up these topics? Can girls recognise it in themselves? Can they be talking about it? But the fact that only a handful in the room know about red S, hopefully even that would be enough for you guys to take home with today, just to have an understanding that exists, what to look out for, and the red flags, and maybe just make sure that it's been spoken about. So yeah, there's a list of the real signs of red S and relative energy deficiency in sport. Is that right? Yeah? So one of the things I'm noticing on the ground at different levels is that athletes might have an understanding of fueling for big competition and big games, but they are, in my experience, not fueling enough for their training sessions. Okay? And if they're not fueling enough for their training sessions, you will never recover optimally if you're not fueled going into your sessions, no matter what you do. So optimum recovery involves optimum intake of fuel for the difficulty and the intensity of the training session. So one thing, and I'll mention it again, but again referring to Sammy, and like it's so brilliant that these brilliant professionals are working in sport, because exactly what Sammy said, he colour codes the training for the intensity, so the athlete and the players know that it's going to be a red session, I need to eat more. It's an orange session, I don't need to eat as much or as much carbs. It's a green session, my carb intake doesn't have to go as high. But they're prepared, and that's how they prepare, and that's how they fuel optimally. You have to help them understand how much they're going to need to fuel. Okay, and that's massive, and I'm bringing it up because I have a difficulty sometimes as the nutritionist in the group incurring that change and getting it. It can be a headache for a coach sometimes to go, oh, do I have to do it every session and do I have to do it every week? But it really, really is helpful to the athlete and to the messaging getting across, and for them to be healthy and fueled, and for you to get more out of them in their sessions then as well. Okay, I was going to put up a slide there on how much fuel you might need for the different types of sessions. And one of the easiest ways of doing it, and again, this is going back to maybe you're not a nutritionist, but you can put stuff up on the groups or talk to your athletes about like say the athlete's plate. So for a really tough session, half your plate should be carbohydrates, a quarter protein, a quarter maybe vegetables and salads, a third for lower intensity, and maybe a quarter of your plate would be carbohydrates for a lower intensity session. So even sometimes really easy visuals that you can put up in the group or just talk to them about will be helpful to them. And another thing like outside of that is just to make sure that hydration is part of it. So signs of not hydrating enough, would be, like dry mouth, and electrolytes. Are you using electrolytes in your, do you talk about electrolytes? Is it big in your sport? Yeah. Is it creeping in more and more? Especially the girls, yeah. And I was talking to a mum there, Sophie. She said she's not getting a chance. Her daughter's in swimming. She's not getting the opportunity to even take time to have water beside the pool. She has to go to the toilet and have a drink in there. So I do hydration testing, and it's really, just getting the basics right, getting the fundamentals right is really important. Yeah. So nobody needs to get too technical about this, and I don't want to bog down any even player or young athlete with it, but you want about 7 grams per kg. And we don't have an awful lot of data on the young athlete, but what UEFA are telling us, because they have done more research than anybody else on the youth athlete, and they're telling us that, okay, take the adult guidelines and adjust them a little bit for kids. And what we're looking at about 7 grams per kg for an adult, 5 to 7 grams if it's a lower intensity, and about 3 to 5 grams of carbohydrates, for a rest and recovery day. So I suppose the main message to get across if you're a parent in the room is more exercise, more carbohydrates on that day. Is that okay? Without getting too technical. And even if you just said on a group, if you're talking 3 meals, 2 to 3 snacks. And a rest day, make sure it's a protein-rich snack. On a high-intensity training, make sure that it's a high-carb snack. Okay? And they're just to go down again there, Stephen, they're just the athlete plates. Even those kind of visuals can be helpful. Just easier training session, just a quarter of your plate would be carbohydrates. Down again, Stephen, please. Moderate would be a third and a third and a third. And then high-intensity training would be like half your plate at least should be carbohydrates. And what I'm seeing, and you might see it as well, is that obviously some girls and some guys are carb phobic. Yeah, they want to build lean mass only, and they don't have the same respect for carbohydrates. So again, going back to the point of it's not just enough to eat healthy. And I worked with a young Irish international hockey player recently, and her mum came to me because she had lost her period, and she was underweight. Now there's a psychology space there that I don't want to go into, and I will refer on, but I just said I will check with it, make sure if she's eating enough for the intensity of her training. And she was way off because the whole family were healthy and the mum was healthy, and she put her hand up and going, oh my God, I didn't realise, Sinead, how much she needed to eat. She loves her acai bowls, she loves her smoothies, she loves her salads, but she's not getting the breads, the carbohydrates, the rice, the snacks, the oats, the porridge, all that stuff that she would need. So it's again, just to make sure that they understand, it's up to themselves how they'll do it, but just to show them how much food they might actually require to make sure. And again, I worked again recently with a horse show jumping young athlete, and thankfully her period was restored just from adding in 2 snacks each day. And there are even just being organised and educating around the why helped her, and she was just delighted with that easy win as well. So that's the emphasis on just making sure that it's not just about healthy, it's about enough. So on to go, Stephen, yeah. So I think it's important again just to show the carbohydrate intake and like what 60 grams of carbs looks like there, 30 grams of carbs. I don't know if you can see that there, but I think it's important just to make sure that people understand what that can look like. And just even adding some toast on a carb load day, which the day before a game would be, adding some extra toast, extra bagel, some cereals. And again, just to understand that when you're an athlete, you are different to the general population. So we do hear about high fibre foods really being important, but a high fibre close to competition is not recommended in sports nutrition. So we don't want loads of brown bread, we don't want loads of vegetables as such. We want the quick release in carbohydrates. And that's just to make sure that they're not slowed down, that there's no bloating and upset. So sometimes people perceive it as that's unhealthy food. Now, I'm not saying that they're just constantly eating Jaffa cakes or whatever, but even doing a master's at half time, those kind of foods are still recommended. I know it's still good to be having alternatives to that, sometimes like dates or whatever, but there's a science behind some of these quick release in carbohydrates, which the rest of the population do not need. Do you understand that? Yeah, so sometimes the white bread or the bagels or the cereals are massively important for a high performance athlete. And I'd rather to have them than nothing at all. So I'd actually rather an athlete to have a kind of what might be perceived as a slightly unhealthy snack than no snack at all. It's nearly more detrimental to them for that reason. So we don't want quick fixes, and we don't want just be convenience foods or processed foods all the time. But at the same time, there is sometimes a space in the athletic population to be able to make sure that they're getting the carbohydrates and the energy intake, or they could end up with something like relative energy deficiency or more propensity to injury, or their immune function could be affected. So that might be just an easy way of looking at the fuel. So the morning they could have a protein smoothie, granola with berries, mixed seeds. They could have live yogurt as a snack with a handful of, again, seeds, banana. Lunch could be an omelette, brown bread, side salad, or chicken roll and soup. And the 1 hour pre-training is one way of getting those extra calories in. And again, I see people rushing around, they're busy, but that 1 hour top up is massively important. So it could be just a cereal bar, rice cakes with banana, a little bit of peanut butter, could be a smoothie, but 1 hour is really important. And then post-training, we call it the power hour in sport, that 1 hour to make sure that they boost their glycogen stores and help the healing and repair. But if we get more technical, that process goes on for 48 hours. It's called muscle protein synthesis. So there's a 48-hour window to really help repair and build the muscle there as well. So there's a lot of eating going on, and you switch it up. You don't eat the same all of the time. Am I in a training day, more carbohydrates? Am I a rest day? Maybe bring down the carbohydrates a little bit, make sure you're getting the protein in there. So you're switching in and out all of the time. Yeah, okay. So I just mentioned there, color code the training, that's excellent. I mean, you can keep it as basic as you want, but informing your young athlete that it's a tough training sessions means that they can modify what they're eating. And it really does, to get this message across, as we were talking about, it's not just one person, it's the it's the multidisciplinary team that helps, it's the parents that help. So again, if it's just, make sure you have your snack, it's high, an extra snack, it's a high intensity training day, or make sure you have your protein intake. Just that language, everybody kind of using the same language. Sometimes I go in and give one talk to a team, and it's like a one-hit wonder. If the coach isn't backing it up with the ongoing dialogue around nutrition, it can just get lost. So it comes from the top. So the more the top supports the nutrition message, the more it'll be integrated into the lives of these young athletes as well from a young age. And I'm constantly hearing, even at a senior level, I wish I knew this when I was younger. Maybe I wouldn't have got injured. Maybe I could have helped with my my performance and my ability and making the whole thing a little bit easier. So the earlier they start hearing these messages about looking after themselves, and not just maybe from the nutritionists, but from their coaches and their managers, the more they'll get the message of looking after their body to the best of their ability. So just to make sure, I don't want to run over time now, but increasing the carbohydrate intake. You can keep going on there, Stephen, please. Carb loading, I don't want to talk too much about field sports as well, but the day before a game is massively important to increase. Are you aware of that? Anybody who's working yeah. And again, I see all the time people think that's just like bucket loads of pasta. stuffing their faces with it or being able to eat what they want the day before a game. But we want sort of lower fat, quick releasing carbohydrates, and we want it spread evenly across the day. I was working with an athlete a couple of years ago, really disciplined, and he thought that it was just normal not to sleep well the night before a game because he felt stuffed from carb loading. I said, no, but he was just saying it as a given, and he was monitoring all aspects of his game, but he was starting a bit later in his carb load and finishing later. So we started earlier in the day and finished earlier in the evening time, and his digestion was optimized then for better sleep, and he couldn't believe that small change. So starting earlier consistently throughout the day and then finishing earlier can be helpful for sleep then as well. But it's an ongoing process, and it's not something you can just do very easily. That's why it's great when you start younger to have an understanding of it, and that you can fine-tune it for yourself. So the do's are making sure you're having regular intake throughout the day, and the don'ts are, I have a game tomorrow, I better have that big bowl of pasta, and they think that's enough. So it's the even distribution throughout the day. So they're just some breakfast options as well that might be look like kind of high carb day: cereal, fruit, honey. And the small additions, guys, have an impact, like your apple juice, a little bit of honey, a little bit of jam. They all add up on a carb low day, or to make sure you're getting the carbohydrates. A little bit of jam here, or your yogurt covered rice cakes, spaghetti bolognese. They're all kind of favourites in the athletes that I work with, because and you can, again, what we want from a sports nutrition aspect is we prioritise carbohydrates the day before a game, not protein. Again, an awful lot of athletes can be very caught up in making sure they're getting their protein intake all of the time, but we want them to have the carbohydrates before a game rather than not just the protein. So the protein can be compromised a little bit the day before a game to make sure you prioritise the carbohydrates. And then just timing your meals is really important. I don't want to go into it too much, but I always work off 3 hours before competition to make sure you give time to digest. And by carb loading and increasing your carbohydrates intake the day before a game, or 36 hours before a game, a big game, you take the emphasis a little bit off game day when players and athletes can be nervous. So if they have loaded up the day before, while you still have to have a carbohydrate intake, it doesn't necessarily have the same importance because you've done the work the day before. So obviously nerves come into it a lot, and you're dealing with that with players as well. So that's just a little bit of timing, just to make sure 3 hours before, a good breakfast. But again, the main work is done the day before. If it's 90 minutes, and that's the caveat, if it's 90 minutes or longer. If it's less than 90 minutes, you don't need to actually take in the whole 24, 36 hours beforehand. So they're just good meal ideas, very simple. Their emphasis, again, quick releasing, high carb, low fiber, easy to digest, tried and tested with the athlete. One size doesn't fit all. It could be banana breads and smoothies, and pancakes is a great one, very easy to digest. Berries, powders, scrambled eggs, depending on what the athlete likes to have. But it can be nice to incorporate them into the shopping from a young age. And if they're not good eaters or fussy eaters, maybe they can say, well, this is the protein for your recovery, this is the carbohydrates to help with your energy, just to bring it in that way. Because that helps, certainly when I'm working with younger athletes, just the motivation behind it. So the key take home there for the parents is to build in the messaging around fueling for competition and training. Just say, don't forget to snack tomorrow, don't forget your snacks, don't prepare, prioritise sleep. The more you mention it, the better it'll help them to compound the message to them. Just to mention, again, before we break for lunch, I just want you to know when I'm talking about this population, again, young female athletes are very prone to iron deficiency anemia. Even if anybody who plays with a ball, it's like iron can be lost through sweat. It can actually, when you're kicking ball, it can even actually call it foot strike anemia, it's called. That actually can cause a little bit of an upset with your absorption of iron as well. So just to move on there, Stephen, just to show a little graphic there. What to look out for in your kids, the athletes you're working with: fatigue, concentration issues, brittle nails, hair loss, cold hands and feet. And there's some foods then to boost it, like the red meats, the greens, the beans and lentils, and the vitamin C to help absorb the iron into the body. Okay, so just be aware of that. And what I love from working with young female groups as well is that they are aware of this themselves and they can look out for it in their peers. So they take a little bit of ownership out of it as well. So just for you guys, just to know the signs, which some of you probably do, but I think it's really great just to be getting reminders. Niamh gave a great insight as well into the development and the research behind the menstrual cycle in female sports. I just want to make sure that it's part of the conversation. None of the athletes that I've worked with wants to make it any bigger deal than it needs to be, but just open up the dialogue, have someone to be able to talk to about it. Is there anything we can do to help ourselves? Because female athletes, they want to be talked about, but the big thing is that they're very serious about what they do. I think Sammy gave a great insight as well. They're very serious, committed people. They have high standards, and they want to know what can help me to improve my performance with my knowledge on the phases of the menstrual cycle and what can be negative for me. So they're just trying to work on the gains all of the time. And on again, Stephen. So that was just a bit about my research, what I did there. On again, please. Basically, there was the effects, like there's 95% of them get like cramping, 94% of them, it was mood disruption. And on again there, please. Yeah. One thing that you might like to know is that they were modifying their solo performances, their solo training. So you might give them a plan and they'd show up at their group training sessions, but when it came to their solo training, if they had to do their gym by themselves or running, they were modifying that if they had difficulty with their menstrual cycle, but they weren't communicating it back to their coaches. And that's just to get rid of the stigma. That was the main reason. What some of them said they wanted to be talked about, get rid of the stigma, which I think is breaking down slowly but surely, which is great. And I love mentioning it even when in schools, when I'm talking, open the conversation, provide education where possible. And we are seeing that a little bit more, which is great. And that's only 4 or 5 years ago, so it's brilliant that there has been a bit more of a spotlight on it since. And just my brief talk with you today is you don't want just strong athletes, you want healthy athletes. And I think that isn't always getting across. We talk about lean mass, we talk about speed. Are we looking at, are they getting sick? Are they suffering from menstrual cramps? Has their injury anything to do with their fueling? Are they getting rest days? If you have a very talented young player or athlete that you're working with, are they getting rest days? Are they playing other sports? If your child, if any parents in the room, if they're really competitive and they're training 6 or 7 times a week, that's really going to affect their inflammatory response, their immune response. So just make sure that they have an understanding of rest days, the importance of that, and that they actually have another job of fueling themselves daily and weekly, because it is nearly a full-time job keeping these young athletes fueled, and they're actually getting sick because of not being fueled enough. So that's my main message today. Thanks, everybody.